For decades, seasonal trucks left harvest to rot, not because the farmers failed, not because the soil failed, not because the rain failed, because the road failed. Every single year, in the Sourou Valley, one of the most fertile agricultural corridors in the entire West African Sahel, bumper harvests that took months of labor to produce reached the edge of a dirt track that the next rainfall had already turned into an impassable river of mud, and there they stayed, tomatoes softening in Holocene, the heat, rice sacks absorbing moisture from the ground beneath them, onions that survived drought, pest pressure, and the brutal arithmetic of smallholder farming in one of the world's most challenging environments, destroyed not by nature but by the absence of 40 centimeters of asphalt between the farm gate and the market. A logistical revolution is finally here. The Mebo presidential initiative is transforming the Sourou corridor into a high-speed lifeline connecting local farmers directly to industrial processing hubs using homegrown engineering, regional materials, and heavy machinery that answers to no foreign contractor and no international credit line, with conditions buried in the fine print. Watch what happens when a nation decides that its roads, like its gold, its milk, and its uranium, belong to itself. Because what is being built in the Sourou corridor in 2026 is not just infrastructure, it is defiance, paved in bitumen, rolled flat by Burkinabe hands. And the fast truck that drives the full length of this road without losing half its cargo to mud will mark the moment that the colonial era trap built into the Sahelian supply chain finally, permanently breaks. To understand what is being built, you first need to understand what was deliberately left unbuilt. The road network of Burkina Faso, like that of most West African nations, was not designed to serve the people who live along it. It was designed to serve extraction. Colonial infrastructure followed a single logic: get raw materials from the interior to the coast as efficiently as possible. Build the routes that connect mines, plantations, and collection points to port cities. Leave everything else, the agricultural interior, the rural corridors, the connecting tracks between farming communities and processing centers, to the seasonal mercy of dirt and rain. This was not neglect, it was architecture. An agricultural interior that cannot move its produce efficiently cannot accumulate the capital to invest in its own development. A farming community whose harvests rot at the edge of an impassable track cannot build the surplus that funds the next season's inputs. A food system permanently disrupted by logistical failure cannot develop the processing capacity that converts raw agricultural production into the value-added goods that generate real economic returns. Dependency is not maintained by force alone. It is maintained by infrastructure designed to make self-sufficiency impossible. The Sourou Valley sits at the center of this trap. Blessed with fertile floodplain soils, reliable water from the Sourou River, and the agricultural potential to produce rice, wheat, tomatoes, onions, and a dozen other crops at commercial volumes, it has been producing harvests for generations that the road network cannot absorb. Post-harvest loss figures for the Sourou corridor are not the kind of numbers that international development reports feature prominently, because prominently featuring them would require explaining why 60 years of development assistance flowing into Burkina Faso did not result in the paved agricultural roads that would have eliminated them. The answer is uncomfortable. Western credit lines that funded infrastructure projects in post-colonial Africa consistently prioritized connectivity to export corridors over internal agricultural logistics. The roads that got built were the roads that moved raw materials toward ports, the roads that connected farmers to domestic processing centers, the roads that would have enabled the kind of internal value chain development that reduces import dependency and builds genuine food sovereignty. Those roads waited and waited and waited while harvests rotted at their edges every rainy season for 60 years. Burkina Faso is done waiting. The Mebo presidential initiative does not begin with a ribbon cutting. It begins with a mobilization. Indigenous engineering teams, Burkinabe technicians, Burkinabe surveyors, Burkinabe heavy equipment operators who whose training reflects a deliberate government investment in domestic technical capacity, deployed to the Sourou corridor with machinery that carries something previous infrastructure programs did not: pride of local ownership. The heavy equipment rolling into the Sourou in 2026 is not operated by foreign contractors managing timelines calibrated to donor reporting cycles rather than agricultural calendars. It is operated by Burkinabe professionals who understand, because they live in this country, because their families farm this land, because the harvest loss problem is not an abstract development metric to them, but a lived reality, that the rainy season deadline is not negotiable. The road must be paved before the mud returns, not because a project manager in a European capital has specified a completion date in a contract, because if it is not, another harvest rots. The engineering approach being deployed in the Sourou corridor reflects a scientific advantage that previous foreign contractor-led projects consistently failed to exploit: regional bitumen and construction materials specifically adapted to Sahelian climate conditions. This matters more than it might initially appear. Roads built with materials calibrated for European or North American temperature ranges and rainfall patterns perform differently in an environment where surface temperatures regularly exceed 60 degrees Celsius, where the transition between the dry season and the rainy season subjects road surfaces to thermal and hydraulic stresses that conventional formulations handle poorly. The cracking, the potholing, the rapid surface degradation that has characterized so much externally funded road construction in West Africa, these are not failures of African construction capacity. They are failures of material specification that assumes universal conditions in an environment that is anything but universal. The Mebo engineering teams are using formulations adapted to the specific stress profiles of Sahelian road surfaces: bitumen blends that maintain structural integrity through temperature extremes, base layer compositions that handle the specific drainage challenges of floodplain adjacent construction, design standards that account for the actual load profiles of agricultural transport vehicles rather than the theoretical vehicle weights that appear in international engineering standards written for different contexts. The road being built in the Sourou corridor is designed for the Sourou corridor by people who know it, and it shows in every kilometer of finished surface that emerges from the construction zone. But here is where the story confronts its most significant challenge, and where the program's real test begins. Engineering ambition runs into the oldest obstacle in Sahelian infrastructure development: scale versus speed versus resources. The Sourou corridor is not a single road. It is a network, a web of connecting tracks that link individual farm communities to collection points to processing arteries to the urban markets and industrial facilities where the agricultural value chain converts raw production into economic returns. Paving the main artery is a significant achievement, but a paved artery connected to impassable feeder tracks is a highway to nowhere. Produce still cannot move from the farm gate to the collection point without navigating the same seasonal mud that has always blocked it. The last kilometer problem, the gap between where the paved road ends and where the farmer's field begins, remains. The Mebo program addresses this through a phased deployment strategy that prioritizes the connections that generate the highest immediate impact on post-harvest loss reduction. First, the processing arteries, the routes that connect the largest agricultural production zones to the state processing facilities that FASO-COSAM and the broader sovereign food system architecture have established. Second, the collection point connectors, the secondary roads that allow farmers to move produce from their fields to the collection infrastructure that feeds the main arteries. Third, the feeder network, the community-level tracks that complete the chain from farm gate to collection point without the mud season interruption that currently makes that final distance the most destructive in the entire supply chain. The sequencing is deliberate and data-driven. Impact modeling of post-harvest loss reduction at each phase of the network completion guides the prioritization of construction resources. The routes that eliminate the most waste per kilometer of pavement pavement receive first attention. The communities where harvest volume and loss rate combine to make road access most economically critical get first access to the construction teams. This is not the sequencing of a government performing infrastructure investment for political visibility. This is the sequencing of a government engineering a supply chain. And the 11th Rapid Response Battalion, BIR 11, delivers 60 tons of cement and granite to Faso Mebo construction sites, with Captain Congo Sadou's unit not just supplying materials but actively monitoring construction progress on the ground. When the military is bringing building materials to road construction sites and supervising pavement laying, the line between national defense and national development has dissolved completely. Burkina Faso is building both simultaneously, with the same people on the same timeline for the same sovereign purpose. Here is what the post-harvest loss data from the first completed sections of the Sourou corridor reveals, and it is more dramatic than even the most optimistic projections suggested. Transport time from Sourou Valley Farm gate to state processing facility on the completed paved sections has dropped from an average of 6 to 9 hours, during which fresh produce is exposed to heat, vibration, and the mechanical damage of rough track surfaces, to under 90 minutes. 90 minutes. That difference is not just a logistical improvement, it is a biological transformation of what arrives at the processing facility. Tomatoes that spent 6 hours bouncing through ruts in a vehicle that averaged 12 kilometers per hour arrived at processing facilities with bruising rates that made significant portions of each load unsuitable for processing. The same tomatoes transported in 90 minutes on a smooth paved surface arrive in condition that maximizes the yield from every kilogram of farm production. The arithmetic of what this means for the economics of Sourou Valley farming is straightforward. If a farmer's effective yield, the proportion of what they harvest that actually reaches the processor in usable condition, increases by 30% through road improvement alone, the economic return of their land increases by 30% without any change in agricultural practice, input use, or labor investment. 30% more income from the same field through 40 centimeters of asphalt, and the impact radiates outward from the farm gate through the entire food supply chain. Processing facilities receiving consistent, high-quality raw material inputs can operate at higher efficiency and lower waste. Higher efficiency means lower processing costs. Lower processing costs mean lower consumer prices for finished goods in urban markets. Lower and more stable consumer prices mean that the food security of Ouagadougou, Bobo Dioulasso, and every other urban center connected to the Sourou supply chain becomes less vulnerable to the seasonal price spikes that have historically defined the lean season economics of Burkinabe household budgets. A road built in the Sourou Valley stabilizes food prices in the capital. The connection is direct, the mechanism is simple, the impact is measurable, and it required no foreign credit line, no international tender, no expatriate project management team, and no debt instrument that would spend the next 20 years extracting repayments from a national budget that needs those resources for the next phase of construction. The Sourou corridor is not the destination of the Faso Mebo engineering program. It is the proof of concept, the demonstration that indigenous engineering teams using regionally adapted materials, sequencing construction according to agricultural impact data rather than political visibility calculations, can deliver infrastructure that outperforms externally funded projects faster, cheaper, more durably, and without the debt architecture that converts infrastructure investment into permanent financial dependency. That proof of concept is being watched, not just within Burkina Faso, across the alliance of Sahel states, across the wider West African region where the same colonial era infrastructure trap, roads built for extraction rather than internal development, agricultural interiors disconnected from processing capacity, harvest losses built structurally into supply chains that foreign development assistance has spent 60 years failing to fix, operates with the same devastating effect on the same farming communities facing the same post-harvest loss crisis. The vision being developed within the Faso Mebo program extends the Sourou model to every vital agricultural corridor in Burkina Faso, and beyond that to a regional infrastructure architecture that connects the sovereign food systems of the AES nations through road networks that answer to the agricultural calendars of the farmers who use them rather than the reporting cycles of the donors who funded them. The diaspora watching this development from Europe, from North America, from the cities where Burkinabe communities have built their lives while watching their homeland struggle with the infrastructural consequences of colonial design, they are being invited to witness something genuinely new, a development model that does not negotiate with foreign banks for permission to connect its own farmers to its own processes. A road that Burkina Faso built because Burkina Faso decided its harvests were worth more than the mud that was consuming them. There is a truck driver in the Sourou Valley right now making a delivery that his father could not have made, not because his father lacked the skill, not because the produce his father grew was inferior, not because the processing facility his father was trying to reach did not exist, because the road was not there. That truck driver is covering in 90 minutes a distance that cost his father 6 hours of bone jarring, produce destroying transit through seasonal mud. He is delivering tomatoes that arrive at the Feso Kosam processing facility in condition that maximizes the return on every seed his family planted, every irrigation channel they maintained, every harvest day they invested in producing food that the nation needs. He is not thinking about colonial infrastructure design. He is not thinking about debt-free development models or indigenous engineering capacity or the geopolitical significance of regional bitumen formulations. He is thinking about getting his load to the facility in time for the morning processing shift. But what he is doing, that 90-minute drive on a paved road built by Burkinabe engineers using Burkinabe materials funded by sovereign Burkinabe resources, is the physical embodiment of everything the People's Progressive Revolution has declared about the relationship between a nation and its own productive capacity. Your harvest belongs to you. Your road connects it to your processor. Your processor converts it into products for your market. Your market feeds your people. And no foreign bank, no international credit line, no external development framework with conditions written to serve someone else's interests gets a percentage of that chain. The road is paved, the truck is moving, the harvest is arriving, and the engineering rebellion that built this lifeline, this 40-centimeter layer of indigenous asphalt between Sahelian farming genius and Sahelian food sovereignty, is just getting started. The Sourou corridor is complete. The next corridor is already being surveyed. Like this video, subscribe to the Sahel Bulletin. Share this with every African who has watched a harvest road at the edge of a dirt track and believed that nothing would ever change, because something has changed. It has asphalt on it and it runs from the farm gate to the future. We will be here for every kilometer.